First things first, I'ma say all the words inside my head. I'm fired up and tired of the way that things are going. The way that things are going. Some things happen to tell you what you think that I do. I'm the one at the sea, I'm the master of the sea. The master of the sea. I was born too young to be the soul into the magic right in my bones. For the few that look at potential to feel the seed in my heart. I'm the greatest in my life. I'm the greatest in my life. I'm the greatest in my life. Things and the words and the ones that above, all the hate that you caused, turn your spirit to your spirit up above.
Alrighty. And just like that, we are in week 8, people. Welcome to a lovely Wednesday evening, folks. And it's time for some midweek in Search of Binge. Today is Wednesday, of course, and this is one of the first 3 sessions scheduled for this week, the other two being on Friday and Saturday, respectively. So, today is all about retention as the foundation of growth in product management. And we have a very, very special guest with us, Ankur Vinayak, Vice President of Growth and Marketing at WebEngage. WebEngage, of course, also happens to be our partner for the Insurger program. And of course, it's one of the pioneers in redefining customer retention for startups as well as businesses. All right, how's everyone feeling? We'd love to know. Keep the chat hot. Keep sending in your questions as well when we are live on the Q&A tab. And all right, I think just opening things up with something interesting that I found this week. Uh, right. So how's everyone? And opening things up with this ultimate cash 22 of the job market. I just had to share this, right? Couldn't resist adding this to the deck just like 30 minutes before we actually went live. Anyway, onwards.
Thanks so much, Marth. I think pretty excited. Like I think I'm more excited about this session. I think it's our growth week at TPF2 back-to-back sessions on this, and retention is something that's less spoken about, right? We all know how important it is um, as a growth factor. Like every company knows this, every product manager knows this, but there's just often so less focus on retention. There's so much focus on acquisition. And also, I think we were talking backstage, Ankur has a really interesting and a different journey. So I'm personally more excited. I'm waiting for the Q&A bit. Like, of course, the slides is something I have some insight on. But you guys are going to have a very, very interesting next 60 minutes. Promise you on that. Hope everyone has your notes, as always, ready. Lots of interesting, deeper points this time. It's more of a 201, I'd say. So keep those notes active. And if you have any questions, please do put it out on the Q&A tab. We will be taking lots of these top voted questions towards the end. Growth is something I know lots of us are excited about. We've spoken about it on the office hour. So this is one of the session that you guys are also going to enjoy. Stay tuned. Just one small shout out to all our lovely partners: Mixpanel, Airmeet, Balsamic, Netcore, Razorpay, MoEngage, ChargeBee, and of course WebEngage, without which this wouldn't have been possible. But not holding it out any longer. Smart, over to you. Let's kick this off.
Sounds good. So, for today's speaker's intro, Ankur, right? Ankur has dabbled in multiple spaces in his professional life, from mobile product management to venture development in a rocket internet-backed diamond business. We love to hear that story from you, Ankur. Of course, onwards to leading, building global CRM, and then, of course, a beverage FMCG business as well, hanging out with food and beverage folks, bartenders, much, much, much more. He is currently leading growth efforts across channels with a focus on education. of course, previously global head of CRM at Food Panda, and also the co-founder at Fruiters, and innovation in, of course, the beverages space, as we just talked about. Currently, Ankur is evolving a B2B SaaS marketing playbook from India and for the world. Right, Ankur, you have a lot of stories for us to share. And welcome to the show. Welcome to Insurjo Week 8. We are so glad to have you. And yeah, over to you. Just one quick question before you start. You've done it, a lot of things, as I just mentioned: FMCG, beverages, diamond businesses, mobile product management, and finally you ended up here. We'd love to hear that journey from you.
Well, I think it's just been things that came my way and I picked them up and I enjoyed the journey. So I think that's the important thing. More than the destination, the journey ends up being the interesting part, which I believe most people are thinking more and more about. I think all of you guys are volunteering to do this on your own time, which is again about having the experience which a typical career path won't provide, right? So that's what it's all about.
Perfect. So I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen now, so that you can pick up, Ankur, and it's all yours.
There we are. Can
Yep.
you see it?
Perfect. We can see your screen.
Super. So, well, I think, since Martha asked me to share a bit of my journey, I'm going to go a little slow just to let you guys absorb what I'm presenting here. This is actually page 2 of Hindustan Times from somewhere in 2008, I think. Back then, opting out of campus placements wasn't such a was such a common thing, rather. Hence, the media was a certain amount of attention to me and my co-founder. That's Marinder Gulati there that you see, who's now leading strategy for OYO. So use cases was an unfamiliar term. I would actually make UI UX flows in PowerPoint. That's as lame as it can get, but it was also a pretty fun time that way. So then I've had a pretty diverse bunch of journeys. Looked at mobile product management. We made an award-winning app for tracking school children. This was in 2009-10, but it was not really practical. It still won the Nokia Naptech Awards. That was a brand back then, if you remember. So one fine day, I was part of Rocket Internet, actually scouting for diamond merchants across the country. And the next stint within Rocket was to look at CRM. So I used to think of CRM as a soft, fuzzy thing where you'd be sending bouquets to customers and cakes and all of that, and making that experience amazing. Turned out it was a completely different play, and I had to really dabble in as much data as I could have handled. And there's not been much of looking back since then in terms of how I look at CRM as a subject. So it's become a sort of a pet topic. I love to talk about it. I love to educate a broader sense of people about it. So to the extent that we decided to pay to just get to speak to all of you guys here, right? So yeah, that's why Webengage is a partner, and I'm here talking to you guys about retention. So well, I think first importantly, you guys are product folks and you want to talk about product, become product managers. Why should you care about retention? That's the first thing I'm going to talk about. We will go through some of the terms which are sort of 101 of this industry. We'll talk about how data ends up playing a big role, what channels translates into. We'll talk about personalization and how this whole thing stitches together. Yeah, that's the agenda for the conversation today. Okay, so why should you care? Retention actually is pretty overlapping with product. So I used to be a product guy at some point, and I found a natural journey towards retention simply because the workflows, the data, all of that stuff ends up being super friendly and the kind of stuff that you want to naturally gravitate towards. It's a great career path, like Suhas said earlier in the conversation, that there's not as much chatter about this subject while it's increasingly important for companies, which means if you become a smart retention guy, I have 20 guys wanting to hire you. Yeah. So that's where you'll know what the PLG, the growth thing happens. And it's not something which is rocket science, but you still need to build it up piece by piece, right? And that's where retention is a very, very meaningful piece. Okay. This is what's detailed out by, I think, my friends at Product Folks. So yeah, it's about data-driven efforts. You can bake product-driven growth pieces into the product itself. It's a great career path. And actually, this is interesting. The part that I'm doing now is about SaaS marketing. And the only thing that got me this job was the fact that I understand funnels. So when you understand funnels, you understand conversion flows, you understand those small interventions that you need to make, pretty much every marketing career is available to you, because then you can figure the rest of it out, right? So that's where the growth part comes in. That's where the fun part comes in. Okay. That's a leaky bucket. It's a pretty obvious picture, and I'm guessing all of you would have done this problem statement in school that there's a bucket which has a hole. There's a tap which fills this bucket in, let's say, 3 hours, and there's a hole that would empty it in 5 hours, right? And now you'll have to answer via fractions as to how much time would it take to fill the bucket. I'm hoping everybody understands and knows this problem statement. And that's where I talk about acquisition without retention. You're getting new customers every day, but they're not staying with you, which means you're leaking it, right? And if the leakage is beyond a certain level, you probably may never fill up the bucket, right? And that's a challenge that people are often going through. And that's where I talk about this as a treadmill that people kind of jump on when they get funded. And I'm going to throw a bunch of jargon pieces here, right? There's CAC and customer acquisition cost, retention, and all of that. We'll get to each of these, what they mean and how they apply to life. And we'll come back to this slide as well subsequently. So what is customer acquisition cost? Very simplistically, the amount of money you spend on marketing, divide that by the number of customers acquired, and you have the CAC. It can get into nuances of attribution and complications, but at a very simplistic level for this conversation, this is what it is. Second piece is about GMV. Now, pretty commonly thrown around term, I'm sure you've read this in Economic Times and all sorts of places. It's basically kitne ka mal becha, in Hindi. But in effect, the MRP value of everything you've sold. It doesn't include discounts. It doesn't include anything else. It's just, a vanity metric now. I think it's become more mature as a subject where people now see this as a vanity metric. But for a long enough time, this has been a key metric, which is considered the North Star for a bunch of e-commerce companies. Yeah. This gets slightly technical. If you don't understand accounting, CM1, which is a typical term used, is a gross margin. I bought it for 5, sold it for 10, 5 rupees is my gross margin. The CM2 is, okay, I bought it for 10, I sold it for 20, and I spent 5 rupees in the whole journey of selling it. So that becomes, whatever remains is my CM2. That's a contribution margin 2, right? And there is a little math involved here, and we'll go through the numbers so that you understand this fully. We're talking about, let's say, an average order value of $1,000. The product was sold 1,000. The seller actually bought it for 40 rupees, 400 rupees rather, 40%. He spent 25% on delivery because it was expensive, and Amazon or whatever channel charged him a payment gateway and referral margin fees. So what he's left with is the contribution margin of rupees 200, right? And now you want to sum total. This is the sigma sign, which all of you would have seen this in your high school maths, I think, is where if he places 5 such orders in his lifetime, for each of these, he makes a contribution of 200 rupees. And that's what becomes 1,000 rupees as your lifetime value. Now, what is lifetime? If you say spend 6 months in the engagement of the platform and then you kind of drop off or you churn or you break up with the company, I like to use this term breakup because it's just a relationship between the two entities, right? You and the company, which ends up ending at a certain level. So that's what happens. That's what's called churn. And now let's come back to our treadmill, right? So we were talking about a customer acquisition cost, number of customers being acquired per month, and a certain amount of spend per month. Now let's suppose you acquired an expense of customers. The second month, about 80% of them have churned. Out of 100, 80% of them are gone, right? So here we're talking about 10,000 customers. So in the second month, you're left with 2,000 from the first month and 10,000 that you acquired new. So you still grew by a little bit compared to the first month. The third month, again, you lost a bunch of people. So there is some left from the first month, some from the second month, and you acquired a bunch new. But what happens in the fourth month is the ouch moment. Now, all of a sudden, you're spending $100,000 a month, but you're not growing. And that's what sucks. And that's what is the treadmill where you start to sweat and run, but you don't grow any further from there.
Ankur, sorry to break this up a bit.
Yeah, I saw the notes.
Some comments coming in. The session's going too fast. Could you just slow down just a bit?
Yes, I will. Okay, so let's just give it another minute on the same topic here, where we're talking about customer acquisition as a growth treadmill, wherein you acquire a new bunch of users every month. You spend money on acquiring them, but then you lose them in the subsequent month, right? So the total user base that you have, which is considered the active base, which is spending money on your platform, stops to grow after a point because you're not compounding it. You get your new users, but you also lose the users that you acquired in the previous month, and that's what happens here. I just hope this becomes straightforward now, and I'll try and go slower from here on. So how do you track the churn or the lifetime of a customer? And that's the concept of cohorts. So cohorts is basically a group of people, like all the people attending this session today is a cohort of people. Now, cohort of based courses have become a common term. And the way you look at this information is in the e-commerce or retention parlance, you look at cohorts and you say that the bunch of people that are acquired in the month of January, how are they behaving after 6 months? Right. So on the left side, on this cohort, you have all of these months where the customer was acquired. On the right side in the columns, you have the number of months since the account was created. So here, for example, if I were to point to July 2019 and month 5, we're looking at 70% retention, right? So the people who acquired in July 2019, in the 5th month, there are still 70% of them who are still engaged with the platform. That's what this table means. And while these are great numbers, this is very uncommon for most companies. People see a lot lesser retention than this. But for the purpose of your conversation and your education, if this is what you're able to pull off, that'll be fabulous. Okay. There are other ways of looking at cohorts. What I showed you was just the activity side of things as to how many people are active versus not active. And the other part is where you can actually look at average order value. Now, are people who are coming back to us in subsequent months buying more from us or not buying as much from us is something that somebody would like to study, right? Likewise, if you're a broad horizontal e-commerce company, you will want to look at stuff which is, are people now buying more things from us? People started off with buying just shoes from us, but now are they buying belts from us? Now are they buying wallets from us, right? So that's where the cohort side goes. And within the cohort side of things, you also then have implications on the other parts of business, right? So for example, if Facebook is giving you great amount of acquisition, but these customers don't tend to stay back with you too long, then this becomes a problem. And on the other side, you have a high quality bunch of customers coming in from a set of campaigns. You might want to set up a lookalike on Facebook to acquire more of such people, right? And you might want to say that, okay, if people who buy starting with shoes, do they buy more often, or the people who buy starting shirts buy more often? So should you be promoting shoes or shirts in your campaigns, right? Those are the questions you can answer effectively by the study of cohorts. It would find parallels. I can see some questions around different industries that are there, and we play from there, okay? In order to improve your lifetime value, you will want to make sure that you're able to do a better job at cross sell. So you will have people who are buying one category, but then they'll go for more categories as well. Yeah. Okay. I hope across the conversations from product folks, the basics around conversion and funnels is sort of clear. And that's where we bust the myths. You know, if you have acquired a bunch of customers, they came to the website, they went through a great conversion flow and they got acquired, but you're not yet celebrating because a whole bunch of them will disappear by tomorrow. And that's the problem with a whole bunch of mobile applications. That's the problem with uninstalls that happen within the first 30 days of install. So in order to keep these guys within your platform and keep them sticking and engaged with you, there is some amount of things you'll have to do, right? And that's where the first myth that retention is something that can probably wait for later gets busted. It has to start from pretty much the day zero, where once you're starting the app installs or you're starting the website, you need to think about how will I make sure that the guy who comes once will also come again. Yeah. And that's where the fun part comes. You just acquired a new customer. You think you don't know necessarily anything about this guy, or maybe you actually do know something about this person. What do you know about them? The kind of time they spend on your website, the categories they browse, the number of pages they saw before they made the purchase. You actually know quite a bit about these people. Yeah. And if you don't really sort out the information you know about them into a structured, usable format, then you're actually leaving money on the table. You know, in another conversation where I was more aggressive, I'd use the term suicide or harakiri actually, but here I'll be a little more mild. So the number 7 days is fun because what happens is when a new customer comes to your platform, makes his first transaction, the chances that he will make a second transaction ends up falling a lot, faster once he's crossed the first bunch of days, right? So you will see that the 7 days are your opportunity, which you still have to either make it into a long-term relationship or a bunch of people who just escape from your system, who will churn, right, and never come back. So that's where you need to be careful about the first few days of the experience very, very much, because the person who's placed his second order, his third order, has a much, much higher probability of now staying with you for a longer period and actually completing the lifetime value that he's supposed to do. Yeah. Okay, so that's where the fun part again goes on the date counterparts. I like this analogy quite a lot because, again, like I said, it's about relationships. One guy just sends you a whole bunch of spam, all sorts of messages on some 7 mails on order status and this and that. And the other guy is actually pretty careful about the kind of messages he crafts for you, the kind of messages he chooses to send you, the time at which he sends you. As a brand, it's kind of obvious that you'd want to be not the guy who creeps you out, right? But you'd be amazed at the kind of stuff that still happens today, you know. And I don't want to name people here. I might have some of those names in our slides subsequently. But the biggest of companies still keep doing the part one. And I know the fact that product folks, usually the product managers, typically hate the CRM managers and they think of us as spammers for this reason. You know, you can use notifications well, or you can use them badly. It's really a choice to be made. Most people use them badly, and that gives a bad name to the product itself, right? At the same time, the whole charming thing isn't all that straightforward, simply because you're not the only one trying your luck there. There's so many more people who will want to get that guy's attention, right? And that's where the little things make a big difference. So, you know, if I have a few seconds, and I think there was an image I might have had about a distracted customer, you're probably watching something else or reading something else or doing something else while you're even attending this session. I mean, from the number of likes and whatever, I think there is some people at least focused here, but that's pretty normal. And a typical customer is pretty distracted these days. So if something is a thumb stopper which stops and gets his attention, that better be extremely relevant. And that's where it's super intuitive on one side that the Netflixes, the Amazons, and the Facebooks of the world do a great job at understanding you, researching your data, and then customizing the kind of ads they show to you, right? But at the same time, we don't see that very, very effectively done by companies who are now trying to retain customers. You'll send the same message across to a whole bunch of people. I'll get to that subsequently. But in order to make this work, not to really do a good job on these little things, you need to sort out your data stack. Now, what does a data stack mean? We'll get to that in a moment. So user data is basically where all the attributes of the user, where he comes from, what his demographic is, what's his age, anything and everything you know about the user, his city, his address, his phone number, all that goes here. Then you have the events. Now, events as product managers, you typically know as things that he's doing on the website. He saw this page, he added a product to cart, he initiated a search. All of those things get classified as events. And attributes get attached to events as well. So the moment you browse a page, you'll have a few attributes to it, right? There's a URL, there's probably the category of the product that was being browsed, and so on. So the important part around just getting your data stack sorted is to first capture all of this data, then to organize all of this data, and to leverage all of this data. When I say capture, a lot of us would probably look at, let's say, Google Analytics as a source of getting event information. But it's not very useful because unless it's actually attached to a user, I can't use that information. So if there's a consumer who's browsed a certain set of things on your website, I need to figure out what he was browsing, where he spent most time, and where he added a product to cart in order to do a follow-up with him. If I don't have that connected piece, it doesn't really work. I'm not going to get into explaining primary keys and foreign keys. I'm taking that for granted. Like I said, the analytics will not let you do the whole thing, which is where you need a stronger solution than this. Yeah. So when you talk about consolidating data at one place, the terms that I used here are called CDPs, customer data platforms. It used to be called I think data warehouse earlier. Now there are more names of data lakes and stuff that get used. And you could try and capture the events or data points from different stages, before the guy entered the website, when he's on the website, and when he's out and he's placed an order. And then you have all that engagement information when the guy's got an email, he's opened a few, he's not opened a few. You know, track all of that information, right? Because this ultimately becomes useful to then figure out if there's a channel preference, if there's an affinity, and all of that. To figure those things out, the first thing that needs to happen is to get your data in place, right? And the sooner you start, the better it gets. I think all of you know cookies. If you're not capturing the right information in early days, therein you'll end up having a trouble later on. And yeah, that's my sponsor plug from WebEngage. If you want to do it properly, do it early, you need WebEngage. That's all I'm going to speak about WebEngage here, though. Okay, so you've got your data stack sorted. Now what? What is it going to do? You know, because you don't want to create the wrong impression, you don't want to go crazy, you don't want to creep people out, and you want to be effective. You want to charm your way through. So what would you do? That's where triggers come in. So triggers as a subject is basically something that kind of initiates a experience. Say somebody came to the website, added something to the cart, and dropped off. Now that's a trigger. You could say as a campaign person that I'm going to use this as a trigger to initiate a bunch of things on the customer side. I'm going to send him a reminder. Maybe I'll send him an offer, so on. Then you have product event triggers wherein the catalog has seen some change. Something went back in stock, something's price dropped, something went low on stock. And you can use these pieces of information to now trigger communication. You'd be surprised. And, for example, if I have a few products in my cart and you send me an email which says that these products are now low on stock, so I should buy them before they run out, the delta on the performance of this campaign compared to a standard abandoned cart is substantial, right? Because users suddenly start to feel that sense of urgency that, okay, if I need something, I need to get it now. Now, of course, it's not something where you get 100% conversion rate. Even this will not. But it will give you a much better conversion rate than what without low stock information it will, right? And then you have the life cycle triggers wherein the user is completing a certain milestone with the platform, and that's where you'll trigger a communication to him. Getting to channels, now it's become richer over time because earlier this was only supposedly confined to email. Back in my time at Jabong, all we could really do was email. But emails ultimately have a limited open rate, 10, 12, 15%, right? So if you want to amplify these messages across a larger base, you will try and use every possible channel available to you. And that's why you have now in-apps, you have web push notifications. Now you have WhatsApp, which is still limited, but now getting better because WhatsApp is, much as all of us would hate it, opening itself up to more promotional use cases. As marketers, we like it, but as consumers, we may not, right? And that's where you could now also attach audience to Facebook, you could attach audience to Google, and you could string this whole thing together, right? And that's where the controversy comes in. Typically, your boss will say that my friend called me to tell me that you guys spam way too much, so I'm unsubscribing. What always happens is you'll have anecdotal evidence to one side, but on the other side, you'll have data which will be hard and which will tell you that these channels are actually delivering value to you. That's where the choice of where to find the frequency sweet spot, it's a function of the industry. A company which is into fast fashion and which does 2 flash sales in a day will probably benefit from doing 2 emails a day. But a company which is into mattresses perhaps should be less aggressive than that, right? And this is subjective. It will be dependent on the industry you choose. And that's where the concept of journeys. Now, maybe one more sponsor plug is fair here. So WebEngage was actually among the first people to launch journeys as a concept which would craft a journey, which is, now it's a drag and drop interface, so much easier. But then you will combine different channels and different messages together into a single stream. What would happen is if this guy abandoned a cart, so you first check if he's available in email, you send him an email. If he responds, great. If he does not respond, you send him an SMS. If he still does not respond, you do something else. You probably get him a call from the call center, right? And that's where you combine channels to maximize the kind of ROI or let's say return or let's say recovery you can get on the cart, right? That's where journeys come in handy. Back to the little things we do. So that's the fun part. I'm sure you've been exposed on this topic like several times by now that most product folks or most retention folks or most marketing folks would think about. It's not really one massive overnight change. It's usually a whole bunch of small little things which are now perhaps called as hyper optimization, which end up being valuable, right? And a consolidated way of looking at this is, especially in case of CRM and retention efforts, is like if you have a control group where you didn't send out anything, vis-a-vis that, you have a bunch of people who are now receiving your messages and your communications. And that's where the uplift of cart conversion or cart recovery would be relevant, right?
Ankur, just breaking in here once again. It was a bit slow again. Folks are like, they say they try to...
They're trying to take down notes as well as you're going through the slides.
Okay.
So maybe...
Quite forward, right? Of course, I'm happy that you reminded me to go slower. It can sometimes be fast. So we will share the slides subsequently, I hope. So then this should be easy. But yeah, I'll slow down.
Absolutely.
Done. Just a bit.
Yeah, maybe Ankur, with the slides, if you have any examples that come to your mind, maybe
Sure.
You could just add that in so folks can.
Okay, sure. So let me maybe give you an example of a journey. So a journey is when a triggered event happened. A triggered event happened. So like say a cart was abandoned, right? Now I need to follow through to see what kind of reach I have on email. So if there is an X number of people who I can reach on email, I should probably send an email within 30 minutes of the cart abandon, because that's where it'll end up being easy, the most responsive. Because the more time you spend from the event, the lower the response rate would get. So maybe 30 minutes is a great time to send the first cart abandonment reminder. But then if he's not responded to that, what do you do next? You might, if he's installed on the mobile application, you could send him a push notification and say that if you're still interested, maybe this is still available. Then you could add subsequently that, I'm sending a low stock kind of notification. On the other side, I could also do a discount for him that if you buy within the next 30 minutes, I'm going to give you 10% off on this particular item, right? So there are different tactics that people would use to kind of recover the cart. Yeah, and that's that. So I hope this example clarifies. And like somebody perhaps noticed, I tend to go a little fast. I'm going to be conscious about this here onwards. So when you get to specific metrics, right, since you have to do hyper optimization, you'll look at each channel individually, you'll zoom into the metrics that would be the most relevant. And within email, for example, you'll have things around the overall size of your base. If people have not opened your email in a year from now, or a year in the history, unlikely that they will open now, and their engagement would be very poor. And that's where you would rather drop them off. Right, so reachability ends up being a subject. People would claim that I have a database of 5 lakh people, but only 2 lakh have opened a single email in the last 6 months. That 3 lakh is practically junk. There is no point counting that, right? So as an email marketer or somebody who's doing a multi-channel journey, on your email side, you should be concerned about this. I look at open rates, and most people also look at a metric called click rates. Now, I sometimes differ on that one, because when somebody is opened an email and he's clicking or not clicking, you should look at that ratio. Right, so if he's opened an email and then the content is compelling enough for him to go through, then it becomes a valuable proposition for the content side of things. So how you judge the subject line is your open rate. How you judge your send time, if you sent it the right time or not, is a function of, is going to determine the open rate. But whether you did a great job on the content inside the email should show up in the CTOR, right? So if you have to improve the content piece, this is the metric you would track. The fun part about automated campaigns, and here's where the ongoing optimization comes in. For a lot of companies, what they tend to do is they'll probably do an A/B test, and they'll expand from that. On a daily basis, they'll craft an email, they'll send it out to 1 million people, and they'll say we're doing a certain amount of testing, where they would probably test it with 100,000, and whatever template or whatever subject line wins will get amplified to the remaining bunch. Now, which does not help you, because there's no ongoing improvement and ongoing learning. Tomorrow there will be a new newsletter, tomorrow there'll be a new push notification which you will do. But if you were to do these automated triggers, now every day a bunch of people are getting something, and tomorrow you have an opportunity to change that in a small fashion, and the next bunch of people will get that, right? But that's where you'll start to make little improvements every day. And if you're able to increase the open rate from, let's say, 10% to 18% over a period of 6 months, you've actually gotten an overall funnel boost of 80%, right? Which is massive. And that's where the incremental efforts play a role. That's my favorite image. I think I think of this as a bit of art, a bit of science, where if you're doing a great job on retention, you have hundreds of little growth loops running for you. You're orchestrating the whole thing as an experience for the user. And that's where the magic starts to happen. That's where the symphony happens. That's where magic happens, right? That's the word I would use. Now, there's a pretty common thing in retention where you talk about segmenting the audience and personalizing communication. I mean, to this date, a lot of people will think of using first name in the subject line as a great way of personalization. And that's what typically happens. But that's the fun part. Again, one of my interesting slides that I like to talk about in a moment, and I'm hoping this would not be too fast and this would become super obvious to you in a moment. You're sitting in a flight. On your left is Amitabh Bachchan. On your right is Alia Bhatt. Obviously, you have to be really lucky to be in this position. But if you are, and if you happen to be in this position, you're going to be talking to them. I'm sure you'll not be tongue-tied. You'll have that confidence. Would you talk the same things to both of them? Of course, the first sentence might be, oh, I'm a huge fan. But beyond that, Amitabh Bachchan might be about Coolie, about KBC, about a bunch of things. And Alia might be about Dear Zindagi, about a bunch of other things that you could talk to her about. Right? So that's the fun part around conversations. They're much more valuable and interesting if they're personalized. And somehow or the other, we tend to miss that when we're doing marketing, right? And given the fact that technology now allows you to do a one-to-one kind of communication, why would you not? And that's, again, where I think of people not knowing this subject well enough on how to really go about it. That's what makes it hard. And that's what makes it uncommon. I still don't see enough companies doing a great job here. Oh, so that's that. I'm going to skip this because it'll likely go too technical. So she talked about segmentation. I think the part that's most relevant lately is the part around dynamic micro segments. So, for example, the people who attended the session today is a segment. Now, tomorrow, if there is another session happening, the people who will be attending the session tomorrow is a different segment. The kind of downstream journeys that they have to go through are perhaps different. You guys will probably want or not want, I don't know, but get reminders about content about this session being posted on YouTube. The guys who attend tomorrow will get reminders about that piece of content, right? And this is a floating segment. This is a dynamic segment. People will enter the segment and people will exit the segment. So if it's a session equal to today, then that today will keep changing, right? And that's where the dynamic segments come in. Okay, so that's where when you scale up, the word I use is fragmentation, because if you want to really do a great job at segmenting your audience, you'll probably come up with hundreds of segments. And the moment you have hundreds of segments, the challenge that happens with that is what do you send to each of these guys, and how do you define individual messages for each of them and maintain that whole repository? It becomes operationally a nightmare, right? And that's where you say that, okay, I'm going to do a modular content. I'm going to make this piece of email here, and I'm going to say, okay, if this is a male, then this is the key visual. If this is a female, then this is the key visual. And alongside that, I use different variables. If he's a novelty seeker who always buys the new arrivals, then this is the new arrivals section that I would put. But on the other side, if he's a discount seeker, then I'm going to probably put 70% off on the select merchandise, and I will have that as a section. And using these if then else combinations, what you end up with ultimately is a fairly well-designed personalized communication. Now, this could apply to emails, this could apply to push notifications, and now this could also apply to websites. Yes, there comes my referencing the market, referencing what's happening today. Is it readable? I hope it is. So Zomato has a message called, it's magic, rain or shine, our delivery partners are always at your service. It's almost like Jadoo. I'm reading it aloud so that everybody knows. It's basically in my problem statement, a generic message, which is the same message that, Smart got, what Suhas got, what I got, what all 400 of you got, right? And on the second line, you have Swiggy's message. Somebody posted this on LinkedIn and I just picked up the screenshot because we have a good hunch about a set of top restaurants we think you will love. Does Swiggy not know what are your favorite cuisines? Does Swiggy not know what are your favorite restaurants? Do they not know what kind of time you order at? And these messages are 20 minutes apart, by the way. So again, in fact, 50 minutes apart. So somebody is going wrong with respect to your time of ordering, right? And now you have visual messages available. You know the kind of dishes I like. You know the kind of places I order from. You know what my typical budget for a meal is. You could actually use all of that information in the message. Now imagine the click-through impact of doing this. And the fun part, I did this 6 years ago at Foodpanda, and we saw the difference. It's insane, right? And which is what begs the question that why are people not doing it? And which is what still worries me, which is what still makes me wonder that maybe I should just spend all the time teaching people how to do this so that I can see this kind of stuff more often. As a consumer also, I'll probably see more value in these kind of messages, right? And that's the part that I would love to make sure that you guys start to learn. And again, this is more from a product point of view. You could just nearly automate this 100%. It doesn't have to have any manual intervention whatsoever, right? If there is one thing that you can carry back from this conversation around good job on messaging and communication, in effect retention, this is the one thing I would want to carry. Yeah. Okay, so we are on track with time. I hope we're at 8:40. Okay. The anatomy of a personalized web homepage. Amazon does it, Netflix does it, just about every worthwhile company does it. It's just something which is yet to mature as a practice among the Indian startups that we've known, but they're getting there. I hope they get there faster, and we'll try and do our part on making that happen. Okay, so how does the whole thing come together? The orchestra, the symphony, the magic, right? You have a whole bunch of growth loops which do a great job on personalization, and they deliver the lifetime value. Wow, I actually went substantially faster than I had planned, which means we're sort of at the end of my structured session, which means we have more time for the Q&A. If there's anything specific that the audience wants me to kind of redo, I would happy to go there. So as maybe you'll have to kind of curate that for me and I can go back to that topic.
Ankur, if I ask that question, they'll ask you to do the entire session again. So I'm refraining from that. But there are some specific slides that they really had some questions around. We'll pick that up. Smart, is it okay if we start off with the bit that I wanted to start with is essentially his journey itself. I think if we can spend, it's good that we finished 5 minutes early. would love to spend 5-10 minutes, Ankur, on your journey, and then of course we have a Q&A tab.
Okay.
Yeah, and in that Q&A tab, folks, feel free to add more of your questions. This 5-10 minutes is for you, so that you can go through the questions and upvote the ones that you really feel we can double down on. We have some more time, so we will go back to the slides. Please do add your questions, and please help upvote the other questions. But Ankur, lots of folk, like I think in the beginning when someone did share your LinkedIn profile, so you'll have a bunch of notifications when you go back out of the session.
Well, that's great, because I'm happy to connect and I'm happy to kind of hire people, train people, whatever it helps. We're really expanding fast, right? So always up for it. So my journey, I can tell you, I think started off as a guy in Kota back in 2000. Bansals was still hot. Let me start from like the earliest times, perhaps. I was at Bansals. I was among the fun fact here, I was in the second batch, and then I was in the first batch. So I was the 57th ranker in the first batch, which is the last guy in the room. That would mean the dumbest guy in the room, because you'll have those JE1 rankers kind of folks in there. And I would always be in that insecurity kind of situation that if I'm going to ask this question, probably I would look dumb. And one day I wrote a test. I did pretty okay there, and I kind of moved to the second batch. Bansals used to kind of rank people, and then the batches would get cut-off points, right? So when I was in the second batch, I was a topper in that batch. Suddenly, you're the smartest guy in the room. So that was a very interesting kind of moment in my times at Kota. So helped my confidence levels, helps my popularity in that kind of circle. And I went to IIT Bombay, spent 4 years doing some amazing work with all sorts of things except my academics. They weren't really in the best shape. And to prove it to myself that I'm still capable of studying, I had to still do something more. So I opted out of my campus placements at IIT Bombay and wrote my CAT. Got lucky enough with my stories about child labor, about photography, about the Gita, about a whole bunch of things that kind of came up in my interview with AMCAL, and they got me in. Despite the fact that I didn't really have great academics in Bombay, I got through to Calcutta. I spent 2 years, had an amazing time. It's a pretty amazing resort-like campus. So maybe if you want to drop by sometime, it's a great place to take a few days just for the fun of it, right? A day before my convocation, I had my alpha website launch of a company called Life Inlines. The idea was to record your life online. I was a diary writer since I was 15, so I always wanted to capture everything and anything that would happen. And this was a place where you could like write things down, record your voice, blah, 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 a whole bunch of tools. But this was 2008, which was like the middle of the first meltdown, or the onset of the first meltdown in the international system. So it didn't last, and I figured that I didn't have the technical co-founder, which is, I think, a still common problem across a lot of people. I was not a coder. The site had some 10,000 people, then it became slow, so I couldn't fix it. And that's where we had to kind of drop that. And that's where Maninder was a partner. That's where you saw the Hindustan Times picture. And that's where there is. Then I worked with a bunch of VCs who had pitched too earlier to find myself a job. They put me to Map My India. So I built the mobile app business for them. This was still in 2010-11, so Android was still new. Google Maps hadn't launched in India at the voice level navigation. So we were building those pieces. That was fun. Then Rocket came by. So that's where venture development was a role, which was pretty flexible and open-ended as to what you would be doing. The first assignment I had was 21 diamonds. So, just completely random, completely out of the blue. Go figure out the diamond market in India and figure out how we can sell them. So you speak to a bunch of diamond merchants, you visit their factories, you see some really intricate jewelry being done. You go to all of those little places where they make very, very high quality handcrafted stuff. And suddenly in your family circles, you're the guy who knows diamonds and who knows those 4 Cs, and all of that happens. Lasted for 6 months. I figured, okay, enough of this. And I was looking for something new to do. And that's where they offered me CRM at Jabong, because there was no new ventures coming in India. So there was no new stuff to do there. So that's why CRM at Jabong happened. And this was like still when a very, very warm, fuzzy image of the subject of CRM. That's where it started. So CRM, in the traditional sense of the term in the e-commerce industry, is classified as the owned media, so to speak, that this is a zero kharcha wala revenue channel. You will send emails to people, they'll click and they'll come to the website, they'll place orders, you get revenue. And typically a company like Jabong would make about 10 to 15% of its revenue from CRM, right? That's the owned media. And this is before push notifications were there. This is when Jabong did not have a mobile application. This is from that time, right? So I'm that old. So Jabong was a fun exercise, but after I think 6 to 8 months of automating whatever I could, this was done, right? So then I reached out to Global Rocket and said, okay, I'm done with Jabong. Is there something else you want me to do? So they said, okay, come over to Foodpanda. It's a larger canvas. It's a larger playground. It's a bunch of countries, bunch of languages, bunch of time zones, and they're still on day 0 of CRM. So we spent another 12 months at Foodpanda Global. And to the extent that I onboarded Salesforce as a marketing cloud, it became a case study of sorts because we were one of the fastest to roll this out. We had, I think, 45 countries, some time zones, some languages, whatever. And it was the fastest rollout that Salesforce had seen in Europe. So that they kind of invited me to be a speaker at their Dreamforce event to just talk about how they do it, how you did it, right? So that was fun. But again, after a point, I had done enough, and there was not much new to do on an incremental basis. So I figured, okay, I'm done with CRM. Let's do something else now. This is about 3 years of doing CRM. So I came back to India and I said, okay, enough of tech. Let's do something completely different and wild. I launched a beverage company. So I'm not sure if most of you would have heard of it because it's a B2C play offline on retail stores in Bombay, perhaps, and a bunch of restaurants in Bombay, a brand called Fruiters. So the idea was that the Cokes and the Pepsis haven't innovated in the longest of time. They just keep changing their labels and their campaigns every year, but they don't do much with the product. So we came up with the most amazing mocktails and cocktail mixers. We had a lab in our office where we would just keep doing experiments with drinks. I had a food technologist on my payroll. I had a bartender in my office full time. So we would keep doing all those mixing things as well. Our friend circle now included F&B directors from 5-star hotels and restaurant owners and such stuff. This was, again, interesting time. So yeah, I've had my share of adventures. I think the part that kind of went a little out of control was when COVID struck last year, because a big part of our business was hotels and restaurants. And now all of a sudden, nobody's on. There are no bars. There's no mixing happening. There are no drinks being served. So we're like, okay, now what do we do? So we studied out for a while. And then I figured, okay, now it's not really looking like we'll be able to pick up quickly because we lost a whole bunch of money in that collection and this and that. And also I'd figured कि यार ये offline वाली दुनिया, while it's interesting, but not something which I kind of feel very, very long term about. It just takes too much patience, dude. So then I was always in touch with Avlesh over the last few years, and we were talking about education. कि यार retention in India में still people don't understand very well, and the kind of stuff you were doing back in 2014, it's still relevant. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Why is nobody really doing this meaningfully? So I said, okay, let's go figure how do you build a larger bunch of people who understand this subject, who can do a great job at this, and whatever it translates into. Right, so that's where this happened. But Avlesh wasn't going to be easy to come through. He said, okay, if you're going to do this, you'll also have to pick up marketing. So I've not done SaaS marketing, ever before in life. I've done FMCG sales, I've done CRM on the other side, but now I'm doing SaaS marketing. The fun part with that is I get to write checks which are possible at a company like WebEngage. I get to meet people like you guys, like Suhas and Smart, where I have a lot to learn from in terms of community building. I see the amount of love you guys have got, the kind of engagement you've been able to build. And I'm happy to learn this. And I'm happy to kind of do something similar for retention as a subject beyond product. And yeah, that should be fun. Here we are. I hope that covers the journey well enough.
No, that is awesome. And the reason Ankur doubled down on this, especially lots of folks joined in later, is also like you've done so many different things, right? And I know like a lot of growth questions that we're going to cover, but just spending, this 5 minutes is for people to even understand, like, even like lots of great careers can be born out of, hey, not just like, traditional linear careers, right? You've done a bunch of experiments, I'd love to call that. Yes. Just one question, if I can add there, Ankur, is do you have any hack around learning these new stuff, especially when you jump from industry to industry, career, positions, designation? I wouldn't call it designation, but you understand different things that you're doing. So what are your thoughts?
I don't know if I have a hack, but when it comes to technology, it's a natural fit, which means I can just hear people and absorb a whole lot of information. So I typically prefer to read everything I can. I can talk to a bunch of people, absorb all of that. That kind of helps matters. And then I'm perfectly happy to experiment and make mistakes and get through. It's not embarrassing to ask a very, very dumb question. For instance, I don't understand performance marketing at all, but I'm interviewing candidates. I'm actually learning through that process. Whoever teaches me the best will probably get my job, right? So that's how it's going to pan out.
Got it. So you prefer to learn from people around you who are good at that space. So what do? Do you just set up like a time with them? I'm just trying to get a little tactical because lots of folks early in their career.
So for example, right now, I've been out of touch with the whole CRM landscape for the last few years, right? And I wanted to understand what's changed in these few years. So now what am I doing? I'm talking to people I've known from before and some new people. What's the deal now? So I'll meet them for lunches, there'll be dinners, there'll be beers. If anybody here wants to talk about CRM as a subject or what's up with product management, beers on me, right? So that's how you learn. And it's accelerated because you suddenly have a place where you can apply a lot of these learnings.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And Ankur, we had shared like a nice little map of people. So maybe when they reach out to you on LinkedIn and they see your location, you might get a couple of folks reaching out to you. And
yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. With that, Ankur, we probably jump back into the core, the meat of this session. Before we take up the Q&A, I think we had lots of folks asking if you can quickly cover up the RFM bit. I think we moved through that. I think that would be interesting, and then we'll jump right in.
I'm just trying to find out where this was in the slides. It was in the segments part of it, right? Yes, here we are. So very simply put, the definitions of these things, right? So recency means the time since last purchase. For a media company, it could be time since last engagement. Frequency would mean number of purchases you've made. So let's say you place 4 orders, so frequency equal to 4. Higher the frequency, higher the metric, right? And then you have a monetary value, which is the best. I mean, some people also do it on revenue. I prefer to do it on average order value, so that you now have a universe of what's happening, right? So now you can combine these scores to now look at what this slide looks like. So this is a sort of heuristic-based kind of approach. People look at different segments differently. You'll say that, okay, somebody who's really high frequency and somebody who's really been recent is a typical high value customer, and he's been ordering consistently, right? So you don't want to lose those people. Now, this is a graph that you'll pretty much easily find online, not something which is rocket science. But essentially what you try and do with this is RFM as a concept is, by the way, used by a lot of companies, including risk parameters. If you've not made a credit card transaction in a long time of a certain value, and you suddenly do that, you might get a call from your bank, okay, what's going on? This is unusual, right? So RFM is a very standardized thing. As far as CRM is concerned, I think it's not as effective anymore because it's just too high level. It needs to get more granular. That's why micro segments come in. The only thing I believe of value here is where you look at recent events with a lot more attention than far away events. For example, for a Make My Trip, which is a customer, what I searched on their website yesterday is way more important than what I booked, let's say 2 months ago. Even though the event itself was a booking in that case, vis-a-vis a search yesterday, it's just way more valuable because what they need to tell me today will be a lot more related to my interaction yesterday compared to what my transaction a month or 2 months ago was, right? So when you're looking at capturing event information and utilizing that as a trigger for communication, that's where the recency bit comes in very handy. Beyond this, I think this is still okay for old school large corporations. For new age fast movement companies, it's just a little vintage.
Awesome. Folks, hope you were able to catch up on that. If there are any other slides that you'd want Ankur to just try taking up, the ones that are slightly deep, we will take up some examples from the Q&A tab. Do add it there. Samarth, I know you have a couple of questions already on the upvote, so let's get started.
Yep.
Yes. I'm just looking at the Q&A tab now. One questions that came in from Praveen, and it is of course one of more upvoted ones, was Ankur. So this may okay, but he mentioned this may seem really dumb, but I disagreed with him at that point when he mentioned this in the chat. But the question really is, but till what point do we track the life cycle of a customer, right? So you covered that bit earlier in the slides. That is after which point wherein we break even, say have a healthy above threshold, right? Should we move to track the cluster or cohort rather than say a particular individual customer? So how does that maths work? And
so a few things here that you've asked. One is in terms of what's a good CAC CLV ratio, right? Very simply put, typically as long as you're making about 2x the money that you're spending to acquire, it's a great equation. Some industries will also have 1.5 as a good number. So if I acquired a customer for $1,000 and in his lifetime he's earned me $1,500, I'm good, right? And that's where typically when you're looking to raise funds as a startup, what you do is, and then that's a part that a lot of people don't understand about e-commerce, is why is these guys spending insane amount of money and how are the economics working? The equation is basically that I overspend on acquiring good customers today, who will then over their lifetime repay more than what I've spent on acquiring them. Now that's part one of the problem as to how CAC and CLV are linked, right? The part two of the conversation, you don't typically look at this as an individual level. You'll typically look at this at the cohort level. Now, cohort is basically a group where you could just say that, okay, these are people who are acquired in the month of January. Or you could look at people who are acquired using the same category of shoes. Or people who are acquired from the channel called Facebook. Or you could do a combination of these things. What happens in a slightly more sophisticated situation where you're doing predictive modeling, you'll see the ideal customer profile as a combination of, as an example, somebody who came in for the first time via a direct channel and he spent 3,500 rupees on buying more than 3 items in his cart. Now that's an ideal customer profile. Now, when you start mapping this with a certain amount of consumer insight where you could do primary surveys and stuff, you'll start to see, okay, this guy lives in a tier 1 city, has a large family, has a car in the house, and blah, blah, blah. So you'll get some of those metrics to understand your ideal customer profile. And then you can kind of organize all of your marketing efforts and customer acquisition efforts to get more of such people, right? That's on the optimization side. So cohorts are the right way to look at it. Individuals may not be. And the CAC CLV ratio is best above. This lifetime value should be at least 2x to be healthy. Does that answer?
Yep, totally makes sense to me. So, do you want to take the next question from the Q&A?
Yeah, I'll take one that is most supported right now. Ankur, you shared a couple of interesting examples. I think the Zomato one, which did touch upon how do we achieve personalization at scale. Are there any other interesting examples of maybe, probably people who already use WebEngage, some of these client conversations you had, and that you can share with some of us here? It might help people.
I don't have something super handy because I don't have all my case studies handy, but I think what I've seen some people do, for instance, in the fashion space, or rather the beauty and fashion space, the recommendation piece works extremely well. So when you bought a certain category, they know that this is the other category that is a high frequency category. If I were to take the example of Jabong, and that's the last example I have from back in the days, is we knew that people who buy men's shoes as a first category won't repeat very well. But people who buy kurtis, the women who buy kurtis tend to repeat much better because it's something which is by nature a slightly higher frequency item. So you would actually have a concerted effort on moving people from one category to the other, where you make them buy this on a slightly discounted or slightly more aggressive or slightly more FOMO kind of mechanism, and then they overall have a higher repeat rate, right? So examples, I think we'll try and put together a bunch of case studies. You will see some on our website as well. But more than this, I think the travel folks tend to do a decent job here, where they would look at the kind of budget brackets you're looking at holidays on, and then they would kind of pick up from that the top recommendations and try to send that message across to you. But to be honest, I think there's very little that I've been impressed by. So I like what I see on Quora, for example. If you've seen some of their digests that come to your email, they do a great job at curating the kind of content you'd be interested in. And the way the subject lines work are always new, right? So it's not just the personalization at the first name level, but every single piece of that email is personalized, right? It's an algorithm that kind of curates all of this and then puts together something which is unique to you, which is exactly what personalization should be doing, right? And you compare that to now a standard media house in India, the best of guys would just send a large digest with everything to everybody. That's unfortunately the state of affairs, which we hope to kind of evolve.
So is this currently possible with third-party tools like WebEngage? Like, would you all be able to send something?
Fun part. That's a lot of it is possible. You could do meaningful amount of work with this. You need to understand the data that has to go back in the architecture, right? Because if I want to do something about a cart edition of yesterday, I need to have that event in my system. I need to have that product attribute in my system. And then I need to have that model that, okay, if this was the product in the cart, what are the other attributes of this product? So maybe this guy buys always shoes below 999. So what are the top selling shoes below 999 that I could recommend to him, right? And maybe he buys branded versus non-branded. So the more nuanced you get about these attributes, the more complicated your recommendation model can become. But that's where the power is, right? The more the data that goes into it, the more relevant the outcome is.
Fair. No, that's great. Last question on this bit, is there a minimum amount, like have you seen like you need to get to X number of users before which this makes sense? Because it depends on data. Where do you see a sweet spot where people should start using personalization? Day zero, or
they should start using
personalization at scale? Like
it's a function of what is the level of use cases you want to invest in. So the way I see it is smaller companies tend to have lesser resources. So it's in fact even better to do more automation with these campaigns, right? So to put very simply, 3 or 4 things you could start doing right away on day zero. One is the abandoned cart. The most obvious, the most kind of most abused use case now. But within abandoned cart, you could add the cart price, the cart item low on stock. You could add the cart item on discount. You could add abandoned wish list items. Somebody has something on the wish list. You want to remind them about this if they want to complete that transaction. Likewise, wish list could be low on stock. Likewise, wish list could have a discount. Likewise, you could have abandoned searches. You came and you searched for a pack of socks, but you never purchased them. Is this something you're still interested in? Right? So these are things which can happen on day zero itself. I won't say that you go whole hog in terms of doing the comprehensive modeling and stuff on day zero, but these are things which can happen with relatively low effort and they give you some outcome in terms of value.
Fair. No, okay. That's fair. Is there any quantitative numbers would you suggest, or is that based on like case to case basis, based on industry, based on what you're building?
So when you say quantitative number, you mean the number of campaigns?
Yeah.
So it's a industry thing. I think D2C can have a few straightforward use cases. A mobile app guy could have a straightforward bunch of use cases. But for each industry, you can define the right playbook. I won't say it's not possible to define one. It's possible to define one based on the industry.
Got it. Thanks for sharing that.
What we would love to do and what we would try and do in our retention course that we build will actually go a lot deeper into these conversations. The company which sells apparel, what do I do? Right? So you take this out into a case study and you build this out entirely from day 0 to day 100 as to what should your retention efforts look like.
Nice. Probably, Ankur, what I'll do is I'll share a link. I know I have a link of this maybe on the deck also, or maybe towards the end. We'll also share a link to that, the series that you are running.
Yes.
For people. So, folks,
let this be
that is the second. Yeah. I think that's the second point, folks. We do, the entire team has put together a great retention series. If you enjoyed this growth week that we have, they will go into way more depth. And I think that is a super skill to learn. So do drop them a note. It's learn@webengage.com. You can address it to them, share a little bit about, what you're working on at your company and why you're interested in this. And they have lots of hands-on workshops and live case studies coming up. So do definitely check that out.
Okay.
Yeah. Smarth, do you want to take up the next one?
Yes. In fact, I want to experiment a bit with this. And this is the first time that we are trying to do this. I saw Samriddhi had a question and she posted this on the Q&A tab, something around hardware, products. She runs a chocolate boutique firm, and she was interested to see how the entire retention for that works. Right. So I'm just going.
She runs a chocolate boutique, right?
Yes.
What's it to do with hardware?
I don't know. Right?
She means it's offline. Like what she means is it's not completely online. It's an offline product. That's what I think she means. But
is there a point I can look at this question?
Yeah. So we just call Samriddhi directly.
I think she's
an offline business like a restaurant or some. Yeah. You want to say something? Yeah. You have Samriddhi here, right?
Yeah. Yep. I just meant by hardware. I just meant that it's not a software-based product. So it might be running online. Yeah. Like we accept orders online and we're running offline stuff, but essentially it's an offline product that we deliver, we prepare and deliver. So that's what I meant.
Sure. So, restaurants actually could do a great job. I mean, this is a food delivery as I understand. You're doing chocolates, of course. So the occasions might be a little different, but you could do a whole bunch of things there, especially once you started to capture customer data. You would know who's ordering, what frequency, what kind of products they order, what kind of order sizes there are in terms of are they ordering below 500, single units, multi-units, basis which you can start to now craft personalized. I wouldn't say necessarily personalized because it's a function of how large your base is. The incremental value to personalize versus segment starts to become apparent where the base is really large, right? But within your case, you would probably still want to break it down into, let's say, frequent buyers versus infrequent buyers, high value buyers versus low value buyers, and correspondingly craft the communication, right? So audience love to be in touch with brands that they care about. If you have a loyal enough following, you could at least make sure you're engaged with them on WhatsApp, and then these offers kind of keep coming in to get them back into the system. I would love to see you guys doing new arrivals and new creations, because if you're doing boutiques on chocolate, there is always a room to do that. And you will find a bunch of people who are like the early adopters or the first triers. They're really fond of chocolates. So whatever new you come up with, they'll be the first ones to take, right? So if you start looking at this, this is where probably a certain amount of work on community building also happens. It's not pure CRM, but communities can also be a powerful way of growing a business like yours.
Right. So essentially, would you mean that personalized communication would help in that sense, right?
So step one, segment into 3 or 4. Don't go overboard with personalization. If you can, set up a simple SMS tool also, or simple WhatsApp. WhatsApp marketing is still messy. So simple SMS tool also, which lets you do a little bit of crafting of the message, that gives you a great step forward.
Perfect. I think that answers my question. Thank you so much. Great session.
Thank you.
Thanks, Samriddhi.
So I'll take up the next one. I think, Ankur, how much time do you have on this? Do you have a hard stop? Just checking. I know we are just over.
Stop. It's the last thing I'm doing today, so chill.
Awesome.
So make sure we cover the questions. No need to stretch it beyond that.
Super. Thanks so much. I'll take up the next one. And it's an interesting one, right? What is the importance of onboarding especially when you take it in parallel with retention, what is the impact of how important is the onboarding flow? For example, here someone is mentioning that the onboarding takes maybe 5 to 10 minutes to build a habit-forming product. That's what he mentions. I think it's a it's a mix of two questions, but I think what they mean is, hey, I need them to keep coming back to the product and
Right.
build that experience for 7 days. That's what he or she has mentioned here. How do you have any insights around how we can really build out this experience?
Throw some thoughts here, which is probably based a little bit on the experience on the service side, also some of the books around habit formation and this whole subject of hooked. So I would recommend you to go through some of these subjects around where people get engaged with things in a very, very aggressive fashion. They keep looking at it every day, every time. So the way I would probably find references in people like Quora, right? When you spend a certain amount of time in Quora, they know you in and out as to what kind of stuff you enjoy going through. So I would say from a communication stack perspective, if it's a content app, I'm not sure what kind of app you're talking about. Let's say it's a fitness app. So the first experience of the aha moment that the guy got something of value should not take forever because the users will bounce off. And once he's uninstalled the app, he's gone for good. So my general suggestion here would be to kind of very, very simplify the first moment of truth where he gets something of value. And from then onwards, try to convert into a upgrade or a paid customer or whatever you have in plan by giving him incremental messaging around the value prop. Right? And you'll have to try a few things as to what this user cares about the most. Some people will care about weight loss as a goal. Somebody would care about general fitness as a goal. And that's where once you start getting a certain amount of data in here, you'll start to see their journeys. For example, I was talking to somebody who runs a meditation app for mothers, young and expecting mothers, or maybe new mothers. What they figured was if somebody spent 90 seconds watching this video which they have on their launch screen itself, they're much, much more likely to convert to a paid customer, and their paid customer retention rate is like amazing, 60-70% at the end of 4 weeks or 6 weeks, right? So that's where you will discover some of these elements, and your idea sponsor mix panel would be the right tool to use for these kind of elements, where you'll discover that, okay, the somebody who's gone through this path will end up going through a much, much higher retention rate / conversion rate, right? So that's where you'll have to observe it very, very closely. You'll have to split the journeys of the users by experiments and see which one seems to be working the best.
Great point. Smart, we have a couple of more interesting questions. We can take up these from the Q&A tab. I have one more question from the chat. Which one do you want to take up first?
There's a third one, which is coming from YouTube. Can I take that one?
Okay. Go for it.
So Vaibhav from YouTube mentioned how do we define, and this is a very fundamental kind of a question, right? So how do we define how long a lifetime of a customer should be? How do we define that LTV?
So it's a question of categories, really. Swiggy's lifetime is nearly infinite, but at the same time, you will see a certain interval, which is the frequency of ordering. So if I order every month, and now it's been 6 months I've not ordered, that's a fair time to say, okay, this guy's not coming back. Some people will still do 3 months, which is more aggressive. It's really a function of the industry, the evolution of that space. But generally, my hunch is 2 to 3x of the time that your typical time between orders, you're gone. So the mattress company would be very different because that's a once in a lifetime purchase. For a travel company, it'll be once in 6 months or once in 12 months. So they need to be gone for 2 years for the travel company to consider them gone, right? But for Swiggy, if I'm gone for like 2 months, then probably I'm dead.
Useful. No, certainly. I think that's a fair approximation there. Cool. So, do you want to take the one from Q&A?
Yeah, take a couple of more. I'll take a couple of more. Ankur, this one's around the slide that you had around the churn chart, right? I think you had one on the daily. I think it was right in the beginning.
The treadmill?
Yep.
I have a lot of slides. Yes, there we are.
So I think here one question was if you can go a little deeper on how M4 is 0 in this case, just to understand.
So
I think maybe
I'm talking about an example here. What is happening here as a principle is you have X number of people who have gotten acquired in the month. In the second month, 20% of them still placed an order. Now that's an assumption here. This is not a data which is empirical. Assuming a situation where a business has X number of people getting acquired, 20% of them still continue to place an order in the second month. In the third month, that reduces to 10% of people who are acquired in the first month. And the fourth month is all those guys are gone. Right? So when you acquired a guy in the first month, from then to the fourth month, all these guys are gone. And you have to replace them with new customers. Does that clarify?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think.
So it's like the bucket is getting filled at a certain rate and getting emptied at a certain rate. And now after the point, it's getting filled at the same rate it's getting emptied, which means it'll never get full.
Yeah, I hope this is clear. Yeah, I think it's clear to me. If anyone has any other questions, I think this makes sense now. If you could go to 2 slides after this, I think they'll get an idea also about the cohort. I
This
think
is an image I found on the web, which is amazing in terms of the quality of cohorts it has.
Yeah.
But it might have a few unexplained elements as well.
Right. Right. Folks, if you all have any other questions, feel free to drop this around on tomorrow's Sunday's office hours. We have an office hour this Sunday. I'll take up another question. Do you have any examples around growth loops? I think that was one slide you touched upon.
Growth loops are nothing but little journeys, because if you think about abandoned cart recovery, that's going to contribute a certain number to your retention. That's a growth loop.
Yeah.
And you'll have more such ones, right? So typically what you do when you have a new person who subscribes to your newsletter, for example, now you want to convert this into a customer. So what you typically do is an activation journey where from the day he signed up to your newsletter to the day he ends up making his first purchase, you'll go through a certain set of messages. And these messages will be increasingly trying to tempt him to place his first order, right? And then if you zoom into this, you'll try to improve the open rate of every email. You'll try to improve the CTR of every email. And those are the incremental changes that you'll make, which will make this into a loop where every day there's a bunch of new customers coming in. Every day, a bunch of new customers enter this journey. Every day, a few people complete this journey and they probably get recovered or they probably get activated.
Interesting. Do you have any more examples around this in the Indian ecosystem? Do you see any great players? Any example that comes to your mind of people who are building
in terms of using growth loops?
Yeah, just growth loops. Some interesting examples.
I'm just thinking aloud right now. So the people that I've seen do the best job here, for example, I think Quora is great. Facebook is amazing at this. Instagram is amazing at this. So all these guys who've done it really well are mostly international folks. I think Indian companies, I'm struggling to find an example, unfortunately, because I'm not being in touch with the subject. I used to be subscribed to like 500 newsletters back then. Now I'm still rebuilding that whole thing. So I'm not honestly seeing like a great example from India.
Got it.
Other folks and insurance folks do it well. In fact, they're customers as well. So we help them do it well. But they know when my renewal is due. So exactly when to nudge me. What is my level 1 nudge, which is probably just an email. Level 2 would probably involve a phone call. Level 3 will involve something more. And so on. A discount. I mean, insurance can't give discounts, but something else that they would do to drive urgency. Right?
Yeah. That's true. I think lots of examples from the West that's been written about.
EdTech does well for us as well, for that matter, because course completion rate is a big topic, right? When people have signed up for a class, but they're not really completing their courses or giving their assessments, a right nudge 10 minutes before the session helps matters, right? So that helps attendance, that helps engagement, and that helps course completion.
Correct. Smart, maybe we should build more of these for Insurjo as well, for sure. But folks, any other questions, please help us upvote some more on the Q&A tab. We'll take 2 more questions.
I see one, and it's of course not one of the more upvoted ones. I actually sorted it out by the latest questions, and I think this is interesting, right? So someone asked, how do you handle day 0 app uninstalls using retention? Does retention have a role to play in so early in the journey?
So let's find out what do we know about the user? Do we know a source of install? If you've done the right level of deep linking and stuff, maybe you do, right? Over a period, you know the pattern of which kind of users are installing most. And if there is any of those users who stuck in the system and who stayed in the system, figure out what event journey they went through. Maybe there was a module in the application which was more exciting for them. Maybe bring it more upfront for this particular set of people. So that's where personalization of journeys will help you here. Whether you classify that towards retention or CRM or just app personalization, it's a question. So which is where CRM as a subject is still halfway between product and CRM marketing. It's not entirely marketing, it's not entirely product, which is why it should be. It should be helpful for you on day 0.
Yep. Ankur, a couple of questions around data privacy with respect to personalization. For personalization, do we need a lot of level 2 data for each user, or and how do you balance that out with privacy? Do people raise concerns?
We work with I think the best of GDPR laws. We work with European clients, and we have a massive amount of data available with us. It's ISO certified, blah blah blah. So there's no data security topic here as such. In order to do personalization, The likes of Google and Facebook, of course, you need insane amount of data, but that's not what we're talking about here. To do a very basic stuff, you just need his transaction history, you need his browsing history, the events that he's gone through on the website, which is available relatively easily, and most people give you those permissions to capture that data and use that data. That's the data availability is not a problem. The design of data capture and organizing it to use it is the limitation right now.
Got it. And do you see that as a bigger challenge in the Indian ecosystem per se? That hey, everyone wants to do it, but the data isn't, in that format or isn't, at the level that they can do much.
It needs some initial effort if you just think about it. For instance, we have a simple JavaScript where you need to implement on your web page, and you'll be able to pass all the events data, and it'll get captured and organized at our end. Of course, the attribution, the labeling has to be done in a certain fashion, but it's again not rocket science, right? So people who've done it, they've done a good job at it, and they're able to leverage it. But we see the challenge that happens is people don't understand what they will do with it, which means they're not able to prioritize with product. And that's the fun battle between marketing and product folks that, not product folks like you guys, but product people in the companies that why should this be a priority? They don't care as much.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the part which I'm trying to break that, okay, guys, this is actually valuable for you. So don't kind of put this low on your priority.
True. No, absolutely. And I think we went quite deep on personalization and growth loops. But apart from these, do you have any examples? Maybe we could take one B2B example, one B2C. Are there any great other examples to improve retention? What have you used?
B2B, it's more about, so retention in B2B would mean what? Subscription renewals and SaaS.
Correct.
Right? That's a simple example. There, it's not as much of retention efforts that would go into, or maybe insurance as a subject. If you think about renewals, it's using retention efforts very well. But if you look at B2B businesses, let's say WebEngage, now here retention is not going to be a subject of what kind of emails I'm sending to him. It's obviously going to be a function of what kind of value is he deriving from the platform, and is that deep enough or not. So B2B is a very different ballgame in that sense. So we, in fact, investing heavily in success management. We're investing in tracking what kind of impact our customers are seeing from our platform. We're, in fact, building our own CRM team, which are virtual retention officers, which will work with all of our clients to make sure they make impact with their users of WebEngage, right? So B2B operates very differently. But in terms of retention examples, I think obviously there's one set of people like the Zomatos and the Swiggies of the world, which are doing that by the virtue of their monopoly in the ecosystem. But other than that, if there was somebody who's in a very competitive space and still driven loyalty, I think I like CoverFox quite a bit for that matter. The UX, the flows, everything just is smooth, right? And I, in fact, also used to like Clearshot a lot for their cleanliness, but apparently it's not great for business. Apparently Clutter is great for business in India, which is why MakeMyTrip has a massive market share. So WebEngage incidentally works with MakeMyTrip as well. So obviously they also capture a lot of data around travel, around users' preferences, and they do a lot of slightly obnoxious looking, but still does the job web pop-ups. Right, you'll see people like Pepperfry do a pretty large number of web pop-ups. It's a large customer for us, and while I don't necessarily love them, and as a product person, you might just say this sucks, but it works. It delivers value.
Ankur, someone might.
I think two great examples
behind this controversial. But yeah, so
well, I'm talking on behalf of the company that does a maximum amount of web pop-ups. So, I mean, I've had this battle at all times with the people on the product side of things, right? I mean, it'll come up from the side and they'll say it's covering my filters, but marketing will still overrule because we're getting some degree of conversion uplift from there. So that's the part which I think the next frontier we really wanted to do, and which WebEngage is now delivered, incidentally, just after I came in, is web personalization inline, right? So the homepage banner itself could change basis who the guy is. It doesn't have to be a pop-up. The moment that can happen, it's a massive play. And it's the part where we start now talking to product managers that, guys, you really need to see why this can be very, very impactful for your conversion rate. So people do A/B testing, people do multivariate testing, people do some amount of dynamic content, but they don't do personalization on the web as much. You'll see the people like Amazon. I had this slide on the anatomy of a personalized web page. It's amazing what they do. And it's quite possible. It's really doable now with WebEngage kind of tools, but people just don't yet appreciate it. People don't yet just start using it. I think it's also to do with a little bit of that ecosystem situation where we're so heavily funded and so aggressively growing that acquisition-driven growth is just on everyone's agenda. Retention is still taking a bit of a lower priority. But matter of time, I don't think this can last for too long.
Exactly. I just came to say that bit. I think it's just a matter of time. And it's good that you folks are investing in this earlier. Probably I'll take one last question. Let's see what's the most upvoted. And folks, we'll take the rest on Twitter. We have a thread going on. Probably share a link and then we'll request Ankur to take up. If you all have any more questions, I've done this. Had a retention before database.
Plus, you could talk about the data privacy one.
We did that. I think we did cover that bit. How do you attribute retention?
Okay.
I think we've covered most of them, folks. If you all see any other questions, I do see some of them. What are some numbers of churn that you've seen? I think that's based on company to company, industry to industry. Budgets that are generally allocated for retention across marketing. Would you have any insights on this? I think it's a
it's the lowest spend area, to be honest. Money you spend on Facebook and Google is like 20x larger.
Wow. That is interesting.
Probably even more.
Awesome. I think a couple of more questions, but they will be upvoted soon. Let's do one thing. Ankur, we have a thread going on Twitter.
Okay.
Lots more questions on the Q&A. Folks, if you all can help us, post those there. Ankur can maybe spend another 20 minutes taking those questions. Yeah, we'll add a
Twitter?
link. Yep, Twitter. Are you active on Twitter?
Yeah, I am. As long as you have my handle, which is Wanderer08.
Yep, we're adding that here as well. We will be putting this here. Folks, adding the Twitter link in a minute, but give me a second.
I'll do that. I'll post it. First.
Ankur, usually at this point, we have one question for you. Yeah, we generally have one closing question for you. And then we have some time that we spend with our members on, hey, what's remaining for the week, something that they need to focus on. So, folks, if you did enjoy the session, do give Ankur a shout out. Sorry? Yeah, sure, please do. We will share his Twitter link also in the chat section, folks. If you could check it out. Oh yeah, thanks for noticing, folks. I'm super excited about this one, but coming back to that later, folks. If you do. Vipul, yeah, I know that is an interesting one. Let's do it offline. Let's try getting that and give him a surprise on that. But folks, thanks so much, Sunil. We do have his Twitter handle here. If you did enjoy the session, do give a shout out. I know it was a little fast, but you will have recordings, and hope the Q&A covered most of these questions. If you'll still have questions, we did share the tweet link. Do add your questions there. We'll request Ankur to take up some. Do tag him and do follow him. He's pretty active on Twitter. Ankur, what would be the best way to reach out to you? LinkedIn, email?
LinkedIn works, yep, but do include a message on LinkedIn, because otherwise it
becomes crazy.
What's the agenda, right? What's the point?
Absolutely. Folks, personalize that message.
Yes.
And if
that's
you don't
to stand out, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, otherwise you'll be the first type of person who asks someone for a date. So yeah.
Good.
Okay, with that, Ankur, we come to the end of this session. We will be spending 5 minutes more with our participants, and we will also be sharing feedback form posters. But would love to take this opportunity. Thank you so much for your time. I think personally, growth is one of my favorite, and I know lots of data and growth folks enjoyed this. It was definitely a little deep, so our notes that usually come out of the session will help them, and we'll also share recording on the LMS so folks can catch up. But Ankur, thank you so much for your time.
And if you still want to learn more, please drop us a note and we'll make sure you go as deep into each of these as you need to. Thank you so much, guys. Had a lovely time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Ankur.
Thanks so much, Ankur.
But folks, that brings us to the end of this session. But just want to spend 5 more minutes with you. Smart and me have a couple of things to share. Smart, do you want to get started? I think what's remaining for this week?
Yes, I will share my screen now.
If you all have any questions so far on the session, drop it on the Twitter link. We did share that earlier. Saurabh, if you can bring that Twitter link back, folks, add all your questions there. Just give me a second.
Yep, my screen seems to be taking time. Okay. I was at the beginning, so sorry about that. Okay, we're done with the Q&A, and I think that's pretty much it. But we would definitely want you all to post your questions on Twitter, because I see there were some unanswered ones, right? And there's anything that you feel like you probably could not get answered, just we pasted that link in the chat, and some sections asking me for the bomb. So Has, I defer to you. How should we go with this?
Which one?
The bomb from the last session.
Oh yeah, that. Do you want to? That'll happen on like Friday, Saturday. This is a midweek session.
Yes.
Folks,
So
everyone had a long day today, and such a deep session today. So let's defer that to the weekend. But smart, like what's coming up? What's in line for Friday, Saturday?
Right. So yeah, two housekeeping items here. In fact, three now. So first, as Suhas mentioned, we will drop the bomb on Friday, which is a session with Anuj Rathi on growth and strategy, right? And of course, that's one of again my favorite sessions. This session with Ankur was like part A of this series on growth, right? Which we of course started as attention. So some of you might find that not in a cool order, but nonetheless, the other session is on Friday with Ankur, with Anuj Rathi. He is SVP at Swiggy, and you do not want to miss that one, is all that I can say to you. The one on Saturday is with Venkat. He is, of course, ex Bounce, and we'll be doing a workshop on making a career in PM and how to break into PM as well. So there are like two parts to that session. It's a workshop, it's a hands-on thingy. So again, be there. And of course, I know a lot of you had those goals coming into in Sergio about breaking into product management, and the session with Venkat is the right one for you. Those are the next two sessions coming up. I've talked about the bomb. I've talked about the sessions. I saw a couple questions on the assignment bit. Yes, there will be an assignment, but not particularly from this session. We will have the assignment and we'll share it on the Friday one, the core one that we have with Anuj Rathi. We'll have a dedicated slide to talk you through the assignment, just like we always do. And yeah, I think that's all that I had on the housekeeping items.
Perfect. Yeah, folks, like definitely don't miss these two sessions. Very senior folks. In all honesty, the backstage that we had with Anuj, we were blown away by the content. I know I probably say this for all of them, so you'll be like, hey, dude, he's saying this for everything. But in all honesty, you will enjoy these two sessions. Friday especially, because growth is definitely a topic way more closer to me. So it's a personal preference. I know this one was a little fast, little higher. Completely agree. We'll share it on the LMS. We'll share notes with you. Next one will go a little deep, but I think it'll be a little easier for you all to catch on to. I think this one went too deep, too fast. That one will be a little easier for you all to catch up on. Another thing is, do you all have any questions around InSurjo so far? I think there are two links to the sessions with Venkat and Anuj to sign up. Anything else? On LMS, will you get access to the videos? Yes, LMS is ready, and 20 to 30 people are using it in beta right now. So can I drop a link to the LMS? We will definitely. They're just checking it out. I think someone did share. Most of it looks great so far. So there's some feedback that we are just tinkering around. So 90%, 10% left. Hopefully done this week, and we will be able to share all the assignments, all the decks, all the summary videos, and the main videos with you. We will probably prioritize that for those attending the sessions live. So we'll drop it here before dropping it on Slack. If anyone has any other questions for Sai says he wants to be a beta user, you know what to do, Sai. I think to be a beta user, you know what to do. Jignesh, same for you. You know what to do in case you want access to be. What's my vision for the future of TPF?
Answer this one.
Let me take that in the end, like for folks who stay back. We can do that in the smaller session on the lounge.
Yes.
Be a Sigma user side back. Yeah, absolutely. Evaluation for assignments, when will that happen? That is no evaluation specifically for the assignments. We do have group peer reviews that happen every week. I think the donut bit wasn't working out, so now Rahul shares a form, you fill it up, and then he manually does this. But for assessment, we have a platform that we will be using. This will be post all the sessions, so mid-October is what we are thinking to do the assessment. Anyone else, any other questions? We'll give it 2 more minutes. If you'll have any questions, drop it in the chat. We're taking it up live. If you have any feedback, do drop it to us. If you have any good things to say about us, please do post it on Twitter. LinkedIn helps us and also encourages. A lot of volunteers are doing putting on all the effort behind the scenes. I think it's only Smart and me you probably get to interact with on the sessions. But before I see another questions, if any of y'all want to send Ankur cheesecakes, please DM me. I think that's a good idea. Let's surprise him in some way. Uh, Thanks for the idea and thanks for the DM. I got a DM, so that reminded me. We will definitely do that. How did you get the LED sign made? Uh, there are so many online places where you can get that. I'm so glad. Tell me how that looks, though. If it looks great, um,
It looks
please tell me it looks great. I got this made, but thanks for noticing. Anyone else? Once the sessions are over, do consider to give a week or so for everyone to prepare for the assessment. That's exactly what we'll do. We'll give you a week to prepare, and then there'll be the assessment. All the best for that. Start preparing right away. Don't wait for the last bit. Need a cohort session or interview prep? That's exactly, I think, what we will be. You want a cohort session or interview prep? We can do that. So that will be an interesting post in Sergio. Do you want to do a cohort on interview prep? Nishta, thanks for that idea. We will definitely try that. Anyone else? Anything?
we can do that. Yes.
Yes, it is a busy weekend. Friday, Saturday. Don't miss this.
Yep. I guess we've covered it all, Suhas. Yeah. So Saurabh has mentioned in the chat as well. We please do hang out and network in the lounge. It is very useful. We do it after the sessions, and it's always good to see new faces, and old ones too, right? So keep meeting, and that's one of the key things that you can do to maximize the outcomes from this. And yeah, please do that.
Perfect. Anyone else? The lights shine like the product folks. Thank you so much. I mean, that means a lot.
I'm gonna screenshot that and
Yeah,
save it.
that's awesome. Yeah, please do that, folks. If you don't have any other questions, catch you in the lounge. I think there are almost 200 folks still here. Someone wants to see the rocket closer. Is it visible now?
Increase that intensity as well, Suhas. Increase that intensity like you do.
On the next session, I'll probably like position it a little better. This just arrived, so I need to figure a way to put that.
Cool. I
Anmol
guess
wants a vibe check, so yes, we are going for that. Can we get some B2B product specific session? Shubham, our weekend, every Sunday we have the director PM from ChargeBee joining us, so do join. I think that is probably one of the best sessions every week. And that is specifically for a lot of folks who are asked us for B2B. So don't miss that out in case you haven't joined that yet. Lots of folks will join us on Sunday for that. So whoever said yes for awesome, so thanks so much for that. The rocket change, like unfortunately not, but rocket questions later, folks. I think lots of folks need to bounce. Are we having midweek office hours still? No, I think lots of folks downvoted that, so no midweek office hour. It's only on Sundays. Thanks so much, Dipanshu. With that, folks, let's bounce. If anyone has assessment, folks, we will be sharing more details towards the end of this month. Once the sessions are over, you will have 7 days to prepare.
yes.
How are we doing this for free? PM intern at Jupiter. Thanks so much, Divyansh. This is exactly like the reason we started TPF was like democratize this bit of education. I think we've gotten a lot of help breaking into product, and that's something we want to do. As things grow, I think we will build out.
Suhas, do you want to take the Friday Tavern one?
What is the question? I missed this. I saw something on mentorship, so I want to take that. But
we're having a tavern on
Friday Tavern. Aditya, Friday Tavern. I think in the last one, Vibhuti mentioned there was a low turnout, so that's exactly why we, discontinued that. But if you folks want to, we are happy to, conduct that next week. Let us know on Slack. Happy to do that. Thanks so much, Jignesh. Last question around mentorship, since someone mentioned assessment. I did mention that Parag earlier as well. We will have a platform. It's already set up. Around mid-October, you guys will get access to take up the assessment. More details on how you can prepare will be towards the end once we finish these live sessions. On mentorship, we have our own platform coming up. Post and Sergio, you'll have access to this as well. These will be one-to-one mentorship. So right now, your office hours are more like, hey, you come ask a mentor, and then everyone can view it live. So it's more of group mentorship where others can learn by being a fly on the wall. That is the idea from office hours. But the mentorship platform will be a one-to-one mentorship, and that is not too transactional. I think we've done mentorship earlier. We learned that hey, things are getting a little transactional there. So we've designed a small program for that, and we're probably going to be launching the platform soon. I think we have more than 100 plus mentors who signed up. Currently at 80 plus, not 100, but by the time we launch, we should have more than 100 mentors there across product, tech, and design. Does that help? If you have any other, can you arrange a session on cost structure and budget allocation for a new product? I think we have one on pricing coming up. Smart, is Nathan's session going to be around pricing, or is it going to be around prototyping? Can you
prototyping and experimentation? Yes.
Okay. Let us try, Nishant, on pricing. We will definitely try arranging a session, maybe post in Sergio. I think lots of senior PMs also wanted to attend that. Saksha, when we start calling us FAM, it's folks. Right now, FAM is our volunteer teams. Do join us to get that. But of course, I think TPF, right? So you can, it's very, very easy for us to switch that, and we will do that soon. Thanks for the idea. Join the light. Is there anyone who's trying to cover up? We will be sharing the slides. The YouTube video is live till the end of the day. We'll keep it for another day. Do check it out. Anyone else? Any questions? Folks, thank you so much for the love. Do share it across. I think lots more people will learn about TPF that way. Thank you so much. Honestly, thank you so much. Lots more coming up, to be honest. We have very, very interesting things lined up for you all post Insurjo as well. So with Insurjo, good news. Lots of folks already transitioning. I think this Sunday got a bunch of DMs on WhatsApp, and I shared that on Twitter. But post sharing that, which you will also see this week, bunch of our folks from Insurjo recently transitioned to companies like Dunzo, for example, to FamPay, for example. And another note we got a note from the VP at Byju's sharing, that he's got a good response from folks here. So good companies hiring already, even before we started out. Our aim was, hey, we finish these 8 weeks, then we do the assessment, and then we open up some exclusive opportunities. But for all you high agency folks who've been using the Slack community to reach out, good on you. Honestly, that is amazing to see. And yeah, that is probably the happiest. That is probably what we're doing this for, right? Making, if you guys transition, that is a win for us as well.
So ask one very serious.
That just validates.
When are you running your course on productivity? I think it is often asked in all the questions.
Productivity, you can see my dark circles. So that is not the right time for me to take a course on productivity. I should probably get some more sleep. But yeah, I mean, hopefully when today Freshworks launch, I mean, I think it's a smaller cohort now. So hopefully when TPF IPOs on the stack, that time I'll launch a course. I'm just kidding, guys. Super happy for Freshworks. I think we did give them a shout out. Anyone from Freshworks is out here, huge day for you. Congratulations. I think great for the SaaS ecosystem in general. Smartha, I think this question's for you. Who's your fashion stylist? Smartha is like our in-house fashion stylist. Anyone else? Any other question? Both of you awesome. Thank you so much. We're just extending this for another 3 minutes. Actually, we should do more of these, right? This bit is fun where we can interact, and I think we'd love for you all also to come up. Maybe we'll catch you on the lounge. I'll stick around for some more time. If anyone wants to check that out. With that, back to Smart. We have a couple of minutes of music before we catch you there. So folks, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. Slack, Twitter is where you can reach out. And specifically, if you have anything for Insurjo, drop it here. Good amount of feedback. I think some code basing on interview prep is interesting. We're hoping Saturday's workshop is a starting point. If you all feel like, hey, you want something more on that, we hope that one session should be a good launchpad. But if you feel like, hey, you want something more, we have the office hours, which is with a B2B senior PM and a B2C senior PM. So even just the workshop plus those two should maybe just be a primer. I know it's not as deep as a small cohort, but let's try that out. And if you still feel, hey, we want to do that, reach out to us. I think it's a great idea. And we have a couple of cohorts launching. Again, for a smaller bit, we haven't made this public yet. If there's any way to switch off recording, just give me a second. Okay, maybe I'll share it on the lounge. We have a couple of interesting things coming up, so I'll share that with you all on the lounge. Smart, over to you. See you, folks. Thanks so much for joining. If you did enjoy, yes, please do give Ankur a shout out. And see you on Friday and Saturday.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. This was lovely. It's 9:40 p.m. IST already. So we'll just turn off videos on. I'll keep my audio on so we can play some music for a minute or two, and then we'll open the lounge as soon as we end the session. Sounds good. So it's lovely hanging out with you guys, and thank you so much, fam. Right? Not folks, fam.